Okay, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald, is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Fascinating hearing people with no science expertise asking questions of people that have no opinion on any of these scientific questions. So I don't know how we devolved to this point. We've discussed quite a bit about how the Basel proposal adopts legally binding capital requirements originating from an organization that exhibits no legal authority in the United States. Yet the Federal Reserve and other financial regulators have the power to adopt these standards without any input from Congress. Mr. Bashir, the Federal Reserve's independence is certainly important for monetary policy decisions, but should Congress be looking at restricting some of their power when it comes to bank supervision, especially in light of regulatory failures over SVB, Signature, and some of the others?
Congress needs to rein in the U.S. regulators. I think that with regard to Silicon Valley Bank, that bank's foibles should not be attributed to the entire banking sector, especially since of their deposit concentration within one specific sector. But this is a great opportunity for Congress to take the reins. I think that the time is now, and I think that the U.S. regulators have decided that they have full discretion to do whatever they want, but they don't. First National Bank of Bel Air v. OCC from 1983 explicitly says that. So I think this is a great opportunity for you all to get involved.
Very good. The European Parliament's Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs voted 41-14 to exclude the most egregious of the Basel III capital standards from its implementation of further reforms to EU members' banking systems. Ms. Skinner, what were the EU's concerns on the implementation? I know that's a big question to try and answer.
Well, the big picture is that the EU is concerned about the competitiveness of its banks and sort of ancillary to that, the competitiveness of its capital markets union. And it wants to be careful not to hamstring its ability to remain competitive. And so it looks at the Basel III regime and sees that certain aspects of it are not likely to serve its interests. And so it's voted it down. And that really should be the process that the United States follows. And I think that what's going on with the Basel Endgame is that the US regulators are using it as an opportunity to sort of pursue their vision of installing a perfect airtight level for the financial stability risks that they predict. And of course, there's no such thing as the perfect levy, and there are tremendous costs to trying to do that with capital, which they haven't acknowledged.
Right, and the reluctance, shouldn't the reluctance give the U.S. regulators cause for concern about this disadvantaging U.S. financial institutions overall, right?
Absolutely. The competitiveness of our banking system, of our global correspondent banking system, and our capital markets is a major national asset, and that should very much be something that the U.S. regulators are concerned with hamstringing.
I want to ask you one more question, but let me premise. The Basel Committee uses a regulatory capital assessment program, right, to determine whether a jurisdiction is a complaint with a particular, Basel standard itself. The problem is that the measurement focuses so narrowly on technical adoption of specific requirements rather than some of the capital levels involved. Aspects of U.S. rules that are similar are not considered in that assessment. I think that's correct. Wouldn't a better approach be to focus on overall capital levels rather than narrow and technical assessment?
Well, a better approach, given that Basel is not a treaty-based organization, it's not any source of formal international law, would be to take a very high-level peer review to the extent that it's done at all, and to see if the spirit of the direction of travel is being complied with, provided, again, that any U.S. instantiation of the Basel principles also comports with U.S. law and fact. As you point out, the peer review looks very specifically for implementation that has a very high degree of enforceability.
So Basel complaint appears to create kind of an unnecessary redundancy within the U.S. capital rules. How would the U.S. regulators weigh compliance with this international standard when they're proposing a rule in the U.S.?
Well, in the case of in the case of the endgame, for example, if that was something that Basel was reviewing, the U.S. would be super compliant. And in many aspects of Basel, the U.S. is either exactly compliant or super compliant. And I think it's important to tease out two different ways that Basel can influence what's happening in the U.S. One way is the strand of the conversation that we've been having with climate.
The time has expired.
Thank you. You bet.
The time is